to another episode of Paint Desk Ramblings. Tonight I will talk about the 9th Age Skirmish Campaigns, which is a game, a project that I have been working on myself together with some people in my gaming club. It's been available for download in the homebrew section since September of 2016. So you might already know about it. But I'll talk a little bit today about how the project came to be and its purpose and how to approach it if you are a 9th Age player. Before that we have the news and the hobby spotlight, of course. But even before that I thought I'd talk a little bit about the channel. So, as you probably have noticed, there has been some changes. I now have a web camera, and you can follow what I'm painting in real time as I'm speaking. I'm hoping this will be an improvement to the channel to make it more enjoyable to watch. We'll see. There's also some new things for me. Not only you are seeing this desk for the first time. I've been moving around a bit, refurnishing and setting up a new paint desk that I'm trying out now. I've used it this weekend, so I've painted up some movement trays previously, but these are the first miniatures. Oh wait, I actually painted up that Marshall that I worked on last time on this desk, but still it's a fairly new desk for me. So now I have one desk across the room where I'm assembling my miniatures. That's where I had the ones I'm working on now last time, and this desk where I'll be painting them. So I got a new webcam for this setup, and I also have a new microphone. I had to get a new microphones when changing to this setup for reasons. I think it's a little bit worse quality, but this one is part of a headset which is wireless, and I feel that that's really an appreciated degree of freedom that I have now. I can move around and not get entangled in cords, which is a big plus while I'm painting. So I'm hoping this will make it a bit simpler for me to record, and I can maybe produce some more stuff. Last time I had Lucky Sixes over as a guest from Wargaming, Proxy Table Wargaming. No, that's wrong. Proxy Table Gaming. I've been told by him that they are a very friendly bunch, so no wargaming there, just gaming. I think it was really successful. I had a good time recording it. I think Lucky Sixes agreed with me on that. I hope to have him back sometime in the future. We talked a little bit about maybe doing a follow-up on the growing the community topic, possibly with a heavy focus on the campaign, the Battle for Avras. So we'll see if we'll get to that in the future. I wasn't able to set up a guest for tonight. I didn't have time. I'm fairly busy. So that is why it's just me and this fairly simple topic of skirmish, which I'm quite familiar with, so it should be a pretty easy episode to record, hopefully. This is also going to be the last episode for a while. Next weekend I'm going away to visit some relatives, and the weekend after that I'm hosting a tournament, so I won't be able to produce much. But after that, I hope to get back into it, and I have some ideas for episodes and also some guests who are interested in showing up. So hopefully you got some quality content to look forward to. So with those channel-related news, I guess, with those out of the way, we can move on to the hobby spotlight. And here we can immediately see the advantage of having a web camera, because now I don't have to take separate pictures and show you the before shot. You can follow what I'm working on as I'm working on it actually. So I'll just bring this little model up to the camera. I think that's a decent focus. So it's a Hexwraith model from Games Workshop, and I'll be painting it up to use as spectral hunters in the Ninth Age. As I mentioned on the last episode. It's a really great kit, this one. I've got 3 of them myself, so 15 models really. But I built 12 Baronites out of it. I took horses from other kits, older skeletal horses that I had laying around. So I took those horses and put the knights on top. Got 12 knights out of it, and I used 3 of the horses from these kits to make mounts for characters. So 2 vampires and one mounted Barrow King. Also took 2 of the horses for my Dark Coach. And now I'm using the rest of the kit to make these 10 Spectral Hunters. So I have 5 now on my desk, now I'm painting on, and 5 more over there. That will be over there. That will be the next batch I'll be working on. So I don't know how fast will get through these. I seem to have forgotten how tedious and it is to work in batches, but I hope it will be pretty fast. So maybe I'll be finished with these for the next episode, or maybe I'll be working on the next 5. We shall see. So far I'm really enjoying painting them. I'm going for a pretty standard painting scheme for my army. So the bone parts of the horse and the rider will be in a ghostly green. The cloth will be black, and as you can see I've already painted the steel parts in a rusted steel, and there will be wood on on the shafts and all of that, and the flames will be a bright green. I'm thinking about maybe doing something more interesting for the barding than just plain black cloth, but I haven't gotten any ideas yet, so probably not. I can tell you one downside with this webcam setup is that I feel compelled to have the model out here on the desk. I usually paint it much closer to my body, but it's okay, and I guess I can bring it in closer if I need to. You don't have to see everything, and I don't plan on moving the camera over closer to my body than you would just have a nice shot of my crotch, which I don't think is ideal for anyone. So I guess that does it for the hobby spotlight. I'll be continuing working on this as I talk. Not sure how far I get really. I'm working on the ghostly stuff now with a light gray color on all the bone parts. That will be followed by another coat of white and then some washes to bring in the green. Might be able to finish that during this episode, but might only be able to finish the base coating. We shall see. It's quite a lot of area to cover. So we will move on to the news instead. From a miniature point of view, it has been a good couple of days for the Undying Dynasties players of the Ninth Age. Lumbart miniatures are continuing their previews of Greek-themed undead. I think they recently previewed a Colossus. So it looks like a nice miniature, though to be fair, I think that kind of miniature was actually quite available at the market already. I think Merce had something similar. But it's a nice miniature nonetheless. And it's good to see them willing to take on the whole range, really. I think they have almost everything covered by now. Also, the Ninth Age has a new supporting company. They are called Txarli Factory, something like that. I probably butchered their name completely. They have not a ton of miniatures so far. They got some fantasy football miniatures, so suitable for Blood Bowl, I imagine. And they have had a Vermin Hulk model sort of thing from before, but I think it's sold out. But as they announced their support of the Ninth Age, they also announced pre-orders of 2 new kits. One is the Colossus, again, for Undying Dynasties. This one is Egyptian themed, just as their new Shabties. So both have a very strong Egyptian theme, so if your army is going in that direction, great for you. I'd be interested to getting my hands on these myself if it weren't for my coming Undying Dynasties army being Chinese themed instead. So I'm not jealous at all. But the miniatures look great, especially like the Shabties. They seem to come with a lot of equipment options. You can get them with paired weapons, bows, halberds. You also get some options for command. So that's really great, I think. So check it out if you're interested. I'll include links down below as usual. Yeah, that does it for miniature news, I think. I haven't noticed anything else. So what else? There's a YouTube channel. It's not that new really, but I've recently stumbled upon it. And it's the channel of El Rey, the former rules team member of the Ninth Age project. So he has a channel where he interviews people at the ETC, talks to them about different things. He's done it with judges, organizers, coaches, and captains, and yeah, fairly varied mix. Great content. So if you're interested, take a listen. I myself is not that interested in ETC. I haven't been following it much at all this year, at least. But I felt it was a good listen, so check it out. The episodes are not that long, so it's perfect for filling those little slots between the longer things you listen to. Yep. Then that will do it for the news. We will move on to the main topic, which is the 9th Age Skirmish Campaigns. So, this is a project that was started by me and my friends back in 2016. There was a new guy in the club who was really into Mordheim. I played it a lot previously. Mordheim being the Games Workshop game that where you played a skirmish warband and evolved it over time, getting better and better. I myself had played it a little bit, but there were some parts of the rules that always really bothered me game-wise. I felt it was often too swingy, and yeah, some things just didn't feel right to me. But he wanted to start up a new campaign, and others were excited, so I got on board. And I started reading the rules to make sure I could follow. And the rules just really annoyed me. I realized that I had been spoiled by the 9th Age, which was fairly new at the time. But already the rules writing of the 9th Age, it appealed to me so much more. It was everything was so much clearer in the 9th Age, because Mordheim, it's a lot of things. It's a great game really, but the rules are not that well written. I suppose for the purpose of just having fun games, it's fine for the most people. But to me, there were so many parts that I found annoying and confusing, and yeah. So I convinced my friends that okay, we can start a campaign, but I want to write my own rules. I said at the start that things would be very similar, and I would just reword things and make them clearer. But I took the 9th Age approach and rewrote everything. Still, a lot of things were similar. But as the months moved on and I continued working on it, it became more and more its own thing, and I took the 9th Age approach and I made it its own game, basically. Set in the 9th Age world. So a skirmish rule set for the 9th Age, basically. And I've continued updating it all these years, sometimes having bursts of inspiration, sometimes it's going a bit slow, but it's progressing. The campaign that we started, we played for a while, and it sort of died out, but I think about half a year ago, a little more than that, we started a new campaign, me and some friends, mostly other guys this time. But we started a new campaign, and it's been going strong since then, really. We're having a good time. But I'm continuing to work on the rules. I released an update earlier this weekend. It's still in beta, I call it that. But it's it's starting to feel really close to a real release, actually. I started implementing a lot of the wordings from the 9th Age to get it more similar. And already it has the profiles and a lot of the rules from the 9th Age directly copied. And well, somewhat adjusted for the purpose. But it is fairly similar, really. So, Um, with that in mind, what's the purpose of the game? Something overarching the game is you control a small group of models, a warband. It's often something around 10 models. I think the maximum for some warbands is 20, but you can have warbands as small as just 3 models, um, especially some groups, like dwarves, often run them like that, for a while at least. This, of course, makes the game fairly approachable to new players, and it can be used that way to to bring new players into the hobby. If you have an ongoing campaign and if you have all the terrain and all that, you can bring new people into your club using this game, of course. Since they don't need that many models, it's not that big an investment for them. Though you do need a lot of terrain, so uh, it's difficult to start from nothing and start playing this game. And the rules are also not written in a beginner-friendly fashion, really. Um, it's not meant to be a rulebook that you just pick up, uh, find on the internet, pick up, read from start to finish, and then you start playing with your friends. You have to to start playing. You really need someone to guide you, basically, because there are a lot of rules. I should also mention that the game is meant for multiplayer. Everything is designed so that it's possible to play anywhere between 2 and 6 people. Do I have to say that playing 5 or more people, then it gets pretty slow, and it takes a bit of the fun away from it. So I'd say 3 or 4 people is the optimal number. And this, of course, makes it useful for those gaming nights when you have an odd number of people. You can, of course, play 9th Age in multiplayer modes too, but using some homebrew rules or such. I know that there's been some rules for that in the scroll, but still the game is not written for it, so it could be a bit complex. This game is, so it's just dive right into it, basically. So I think that's one of its strengths. uh, so on to the game itself. Uh, just like the Night Age, it has a pre-game sequence where you share your warband roster and you build the battlefield and you select a scenario. You select deployment maps, the deployment zone, and you deploy your warband and all of that. It's really quite similar to the Night Age. I think the most important difference, or most important thing to note, is what's called the fate rerolls. This is something that is really quite important for the game, and most warbands have access to this. Basically, you can choose an alignment for the warband. This is something that I'm thinking about redoing slightly. But you had the choice between having a lot of fate rerolls or a lot of exploration dice that will come mentioned again in the post-game sequence. So fate rerolls are you get between 0 and 3, and these are you get tokens basically, and you can spend them to reroll any single die, which can be part of another for a larger roll and all of that. So this can really change balance and such, and one of the the important keys to victory is knowing when to use these. A lot of people simply save them for the post-game sequence to help their models survive, but if you can use them to secure the game, that can be really, really important. So the game itself is pretty much the same phase structure as the 9th Age. However, there's one additional phase in the beginning called the recovery phase. Here your models can recover and get better. If they have taken damage earlier in the game, they can recover those damages and continue fighting basically. The charge phase is fairly similar. The big difference is that you don't just measure the distance in a straight line and then you roll to beat that. You instead plot your charge beforehand with all the moves that you're gonna do, and then you roll. You calculate the total distance and then you roll to try and beat that. Which is it makes the distance longer, but it's really necessary because of how detailed the movement is. Actually, I think I go into that right away. So because you don't have units, you only have models. Part of the movement phase really gets simpler. You don't have things like characters moving in and out. You don't have wheels or reforms, such things. This also makes other parts of the game simpler. As mentioned, characters is not a thing, but also spell effects get a lot simpler, and other things. So there are a lot of benefits in different areas. But movement is instead probably more complex than the 9th Age. That is because you have the option to move in a much more three-dimensional manner using the terrain. So you can jump up and down and gaps. You can also climb on walls. And generally, I feel that these rules are quite intuitive, at least in what you can do, possibly. You might have to take some time to learn exactly how to do it, but what you're able to do should feel quite intuitive. If you walk up to a wall, you are able to climb it. You just have to figure out how, basically. So because of this, the charge also gets a little bit more complex. You have to plot the charge beforehand, and then you calculate the distance, and then you roll, and if you beat that distance, you make it in. You still add your advanced rate as usual, The unit profile is pretty much the same. You have some additional values for sort of after game effects such as experience and rating. They are not generally used during the game. It happens, but otherwise it's a very similar profile. The charge phase also has a difference in that you don't have any charge reactions. You can just stand. But what you can do is you can intercept charges with other models. So if the enemy charges one of your models and it moves close to one of your models during the charge move, you can move in to intercept. So you can choose who takes the charge, but you get some disadvantages too. The enemy basically gains distracting, so you have a harder time hitting them. So that's a big difference. But that's about it for the movement and charge phase, I think. There are some different names and such. One thing that you need to get to wrap your head around to play the game smoothly, I think, is the difference between moves and maneuvers. This is something that the Ninth Age hasn't defined in a similar way. But basically, a move is the overarching thing that you do. So if you can make a march move or an advance move, and this defines what types of maneuvers you can do and how far you will move. And maneuvers are similar to wheels, I guess. But in the Ninth Age, there's only really two maneuvers. You can move forward or you can wheel. And then you have some, yeah, you can make reforms, which I guess is a type of move, and all of that. But maneuvers in the Ninth Age are the basic one. The tactical maneuver is just moving around, and then you have the ability to jump and climb and other things. So that's a distinction that you need to have to wrap your head around, basically, I think. So we will move on to the next phase of the game, which is shooting. And for starters, one difference here is that you don't have an aim score on your weapons. You instead have a ballistic skill value. So it does the same. It tells you how well you hit the enemy, but it's inverted basically. So you have to, if you have ballistic skill 3, you hit on a 4+, and if you have ballistic skill 4, you hit on a 3+. So a higher value means you're hitting better. Again, something to wrap your head around. But the difference is not that big. You also have a rule that you have to shoot at the closest target, unless some different conditions apply, such as other targets being easier to hit and things like that. But generally, you have to shoot at the closest. It's a not that important rule, I guess, really, but it creates a bit more feeling that your models are a bit afraid. They have to shoot at the closest threat, basically. Even though other things might be able to handle that. Though I guess I skipped a phase, which is the magic phase. And it's a lot simpler really than the Ninth Age. You don't have a pool of magic dice. Instead, each wizard, and not all warbands have wizards. It's fairly common to not have. But each wizard can cast a single spell during each magic phase. And to cast a spell, you roll 2d6 and you have to beat the casting value of the spell. So it's a lot more straightforward and yeah, really a lot simpler. I'm thinking about maybe adding some rules to have the option of making it more complex, more similar to the Ninth Age, would they basically bring back the mini game that is the magic phase. There is a document part of the game which is optional rules, so we do have the place to put it, basically. So back to the shooting phase, or yeah, after the magic there's the shooting, and as I said, you have the ballistic skill and you have to shoot at the closest enemy model. Also, cover is a bit different, and line of sight in general, because of the amount of terrain used in Skirmish and the three-dimensional nature of the game. Using this artificial line of sight didn't really work. So instead it uses what's called real line of sight, which means that you have to get down on the level of the miniatures and you try to imagine what they see if you draw line of sight from their actual eyes. And cover works in that if any part of the target model is obscured by terrain, when you look through the eyes of the shooter, then it gains cover. You suffer a -1 to hit. There's no difference between soft or hard cover, though there are options to add those rules in the optional rules document. It to me it feels just a lot simpler to have it super binary. If any little part of the target model is obscured, it's cover, and if any little part of the target model is visible, you can see it, but you get cover. So pretty straightforward. So the close combat phase is very similar to Ninth Age. You pick a combat, you fight a combat, and you move on to the next combat. Something to note is that because of the multiplayer nature, you resolve every combat that has your own models in it, and all models belonging to enemy players also get to fight. This can mean, but it's very rare, that you get fights where a lot of players are involved, and then those fights happen 3 or even 4 times per game turn instead of the usual 2, if models survive that long at least. So that's the difference. There's also no real break test. There is something called all alone, which can cause you to run away if you're fighting against more than one enemy model, but it doesn't happen that often, really. If you fight against more than one enemy model, you're generally dead already, or at least knocked down, something like that. So that brings us to, I think, perhaps the biggest difference between the games, other than movement phase, obviously, which is attacks and damage. So a normal model in the 9th Age fantasy battles has a single health point. Here, that doesn't feel detailed enough. So instead, a normal model has 6 health points. To compensate, every time you successfully wound something, so you roll to hit, you roll to wound, and they roll saves. And if your wound goes through those, then you have to roll damage. And to do that, you roll 2d3, and the defending model loses that many health points. If you cast 2 successful wounds, 2 or more, you roll 1 additional d3 for every wound after the first. So if you cast 2, it's 3d3, and 3 it's 4d3. Also, if your attack brings the enemy model down to 3 or less remaining health points, they will become knocked down or stunned, which is it's called a health state. So it makes it harder for them to fight back, and they are more vulnerable to attacks. So you get an opportunity to finish them off if you can. In your recovery phase, you recover these types of damages. So if you're knocked down, you become stunned, and if you're knocked down, you stand up and become dazed. And also in the recovery phase, you recover 1 health point every turn. As I said, big models, normal models have 6 health points. So generally, a model with if you convert it to fantasy battles, it translates to 1 health point being 6 in Skirmish, and every health point after that is equal to 3 health points. So a standard ogre has 12 health points, and yeah, things like that. Yeah. Next we have the terrain, and as I mentioned, it's a very important part of the game. You can move around 3-dimensionally. Generally, you want a lot of terrain. I can show you some picture of our games and our setup to give you an idea. And the rules for terrain are a bit more complex because of this. And it's not as rigid in this division that you have a table which is open terrain, and then everything that's not the table is something special. Is a terrain feature. Instead, you have pretty much the whole table covered in terrain. So the rules define that normal flat surfaces are what you walk around on, and um, vertical surfaces are what you can climb on, basically. So it's much broader than fantasy battles. You also have rules for things catching fire and falling apart, which again adds another layer of detail, but makes it a bit more complex. Next we have the model rules, and just like the Ninth Age, these are divided into universal rules and uh, attack attributes and defensive, personal protection, and all of that. It's not as necessary in Skirmish as it is in the Ninth Age. The Ninth Age really makes use of it for their multi-part models, but those are not that common in Skirmish, so it's not as useful really. But I think it's a value in itself to have the same system. Uh, and there are some multi-part models at least, so it's good for that. You have a lot of the same rules at, in some categories at least. You have ages and fortitude and the attack attributes like flaming and poison, toxic, divine, and all of that. Uh, you have some additional rules and some are gone. There's no rules for characters, as I said. Uh, so overall, it's a fairly similar chapter, and if you know the Ninth Age, you will feel very familiar if you read poison attacks on your unit profile, um, and you're familiar with the Ninth Age, you will know what it does in this game too, uh, which I think is an advantage. So the equipment, which is part of the model rules, is a bit more complex in Skirmish. This is because it's a bit more detailed. You can have two pieces of handheld equipment in combat. Basically, you have two hands, so you can have two single-handed weapons or one two-handed weapon or a shield or something like that. And this makes it more complex, but it gives you a lot more opportunity to customize your models. You also have more rules tied to specific hand weapons. So instead of just hand weapons being the default weapon, you can choose between a sword that gives you the ability to deflect blows, or an axe that pierces armor better, or a club, or a hammer which causes uh, the enemy to be stunned more often. The club is the default weapon, it has no rules. You can have a dagger, which is really cheap, but it also gives the opponent a better armor save. It actually improves the armor save of the attacker, of the defender, which is fairly interesting. Uh, so you have a lot of more to choose from there. I need to dilute this a little bit. I actually started moving on to the washing part of the ghostly bits. I wasn't sure if I would make it this far during the recording, but I did. So equipment is a big difference. in that it's much more detailed. You also, a lot of the traditionally army specific equipment is moved to the common items. So you have the flintlock axe here and uh, the repeater handgun, repeater pistol. You have moonlight arrows and a lot of stuff, lion's fur. And there are rules in the game that make sure that these are cheaper often for the army that they belong to. And also that generally the other armies cannot even use them. Each model has defined what weapons they can wield and what armor they can use. But you can get situations where you are able to use weapons of other factions, basically. So you can create some really unique characters. I have a halfling with a handgun, for example, and I had a goblin with pistols, which was awesome. Um, though I think he was robbed, so he lost his pistols. But yeah, you get a lot more options here because of that. So we will move on to the post-game sequence, which, as the name suggests, happens after the game. Sometimes we joke a little bit about this being the fun part of the game, and to a degree that's true. It's a very interesting part of the game, at least. The first thing you do is that you roll injuries. So during the game, models are taken out of action, but this does not necessarily mean that they are dead. Instead, during this phase, you roll for that and see what actually happens. Sometimes it's nothing at all, and they can fight on without issue. Sometimes they die, sometimes they get injuries and suffer permanent reductions to their abilities and all of that. Anything in between. So that's a really scary phase, but also a lot of fun. Usually people save up their fate rerolls for this phase to make sure that their precious models don't die. But sometimes it happens anyway. Rerolls are fickle. And you can get a lot of cool effects, such as hatred against the models that killed you and all of that. Next we have the exploration phase, where you roll dice to see how well you explore the area afterwards and what you are able to find. This provides you with your basic income. As I said, you have these fate rerolls, and when you choose your warband, you can choose to either be good at gaining fate rerolls or good at gaining exploration dice. And if you're good at gaining exploration dice, you also have an easier time allying yourself with other people and hirelings that we'll also mention. So it's a tricky choice. A fun thing about these exploration dice is also that not only do they provide you with your basic income, if you roll any doubles or triples, you compare these results with a long table, uh, and you get some different results which can give you equipment or abilities or a lot of different things. So it represents your warband searching the area and finding uh, things of value, and this table tells you what you stumble across and what unique things you find in there. So that's quite interesting. uh, Next you have the experience phase, where you calculate how much experience your models get from the battle. Quite often it's just one, but if they did well, they can get more. Then you have the advancement phase, where some of your models will gain new abilities because they gained experience. There's a track that helps you check this. Uh, and you roll on some tables, and you might get skills on your heroes, which is a special type of advancement because it allows you to choose new skills, and skills are basically a separate category of model rules, and it can give you anything from more attacks, um, better resilience, the ability to climb or jump better, longer, faster, um, different command abilities, more spells on your wizards, and a lot of different things. So this is another really fun part of the game. You can really customize your heroes and make them unique by choosing these different skills. So yeah, that's a great part of the game. This is using skills is also how you can be able to learn how to use new weapons, even those that are generally unique to certain armies. There are still some items that are unique to armies. The vermin swarm have some contraptions that we just imagine that no one else would ever use, even if they were paid to do it. So those are only ever available to the vermin swarm. Similarly, the Madget's flail and things like that. You also have the hand cannon of the ogre khans, which is, however, a common item. So theoretically, anybody could use it, but you have to be a large model. So very few actually can. So there's some different ways to regulate those things. um, then you have the trading phase in the post-game sequence, where you buy new equipment and new models using the income you got. Some battles, all you do is replenish your ranks if models were killed. Other times you expand and get more models, or you get some fancy equipment. Things like that. A lot of options. Here you also have the option to bring in hirelings, which are special kind of characters. So you can get some even more flavor into your warband using these fairly unique models. I don't know what to bring up as an example. Um, you can get an Imperial Assassin, or a Volskayan Hunter, something like that. There's a lot of different things. A separate document with several different hirelings. So that's a fun part of the game as well. Also gives you some wonderful modeling opportunities to really make those models stand out. Something I really appreciate. Yeah, so that's the last phase of the game. You have a warband phase where you do some bookkeeping. Basically, you check if you still have a general or a leader, as it's called, and you calculate your warband rating, which tells you how good your warband is. Um, if you have a very high rating and your opponent has a low one, the opponent gets some bonuses and such. So yeah, I think that's gonna do it really for the game. Um, that's the different parts of the game at least. I've been rambling on for a good while now about it. Um, so I think in conclusion, you can play it as a fairly simple game, but there's a lot of depth available and a lot of different choices you can make to really create a unique and fun warband. Uh, one additional depth, I mentioned this document of optional rules, and in there we have a table called the random happenings table. So this is a thing we often use in our games, and you roll a die at the start of every player turn in the second game turn and onwards. And if you roll a 1, something happens. Only one thing can happen per game. So once someone has rolled a 1, you stop doing that. And to figure out what happens, you roll 2 dice on a D66 table. So there's 36 different results. And they just bring in crazy and wacky stuff. Sometimes additional models controlled by the game, sometimes events, the gravity starts shifting and you can move around more freely, and yeah, a lot of different things. So that really spices things up. Also, it's possible in, in this phase to gain more abilities for your models. It's fairly rare, but we have had a skink that gained the ability to take academic skills. So he became a scholar out of nowhere. So that was fairly interesting. So yeah, now I feel that I rambled on enough. I think I mentioned pretty much every part of the game. So to wrap things up, we'll take a look at the desk again. And I've gotten longer than I thought I would actually. So I have painted the the green wash on all of the models except one. I will finish that up and then I'll take a picture, because even though you can see my progress here, this is still not very good, so I'll take an actual photo and include that in the video as well. But yeah, that's about it then. So thank you for listening. I hope I'll see you on the next one, even though that will be a little while from now. So yeah, take care and thank you for listening. Cheers.